All right, here. Okay, everybody signed in. Corey can hear and everything?
Yeah.
All right. Now, we have a number of different questions. One from Lauren that says, I'd be really interested in hearing about any of you dealing with clients who have experienced sexual abuse. And I have some things I can want to say about it, but are there any of you worked with people that you or that have questions about that?
Yeah, I've worked with some. I have questions
Yeah.
too.
Okay. Ask your question.
So it would seem a lot at the root and the calf. However, I sometimes wonder how to complete the whole thing for the person. It seems to sometimes come out quite quickly from the root, but I sometimes feel they're not quite ready for it. So my question might be, can we better prepare them for
you
that?
can't you shouldn't have to worry about whether they're ready for it. When it starts to come out, they're ready for it. You just have to be able to guide it. It's like saying, gee, we got the, it's almost like a war. You don't want to participate in the war, but when it comes along, you better. And if you, and depending on how you do whatever you do, you can either make it shorter or longer. And so that there are several things about sexual abuse. There's been a lot of it. Most of it, or a great deal of it, is not remembered. That it's buried inside, and it comes out in people's behavior, how they act, how they respond to people, their maybe for example, a woman gets married and is very uncomfortable with sex with her husband, and even though she wants to be, and so it interferes with one's life. Part of what you have to remember, what you do have to do, is realize that sexual abuse affects a person in many different ways, just as any trauma does. Sexual abuse would involve anger, fear, betrayal, often, just remembered physical pain, sense of worth, all sorts of things. And they're all so that when they start to emerge with someone, for example, who was not aware that they were sexually abused, whatever starts to come up, you have to treat that by what is its emotional content, and can I work with that? Can I help that come out? In other words, if they're afraid, and this is, of course, dealing with fear is something we have for a lot of reasons. The question is, how are you going to deal with that fear? If you have to, if you don't try to bring it out, it's going to stay in there and affect them as they move forward in their life. But we can help bring it out by working at the solar plexus and drawing it out at the solar plexus. And as you work there, it's like there's a quantity of it, a given quantity, and you begin draining out that quantity so that there's less and less, and eventually there's other things start coming out as well. Usually the fear is well, I shouldn't say usually, but very often the fear is uppermost. And as it as the fear starts to subside, the anger that they were never able to express or get into begins to come out. And jumbles of feelings of feeling unworthy, or you can work with that at the cost. Is this making any sense?
Yes.
To me, Richard, that is making a lot of sense, because I have worked with 2 clients who have been sexually abused, and what I did was I worked with them as though it was any other emotional trauma, and worked and found that often the sexual problem has to be worked through, in a sense, through the different emotions. It could be, as you say, fear, or it could be anger, or it could be lack of self-worth, and so on. And there were good results from that. But I think the question I would be asking would be, what about those who have been sexually abused and it hasn't been, that person hasn't been aware of it until much later on in life, for example, and it's only later on when it's been discovered, or that person has discovered that he or she has been sexually abused?
Well, when you think about it, among all the people that you've worked with, lots of them have not remembered the kinds of incidents that in the beginning, they don't at all. And so it's not unusual for people for the sexual abuse to be hidden. But one of the reasons that sexual abuse is hidden or no longer brought to the surface is because, first of all, they may, if it's a lot of sexual abuse occurs between children that are relatives, and so they're cautioned when it's taking place. Don't tell mother, don't tell father, don't tell whoever. We mustn't tell anybody. This is our secret, and that kind of thing. And so it becomes inhibited for those reasons. And secondly, I think you'll find that a great number of people do not want to reveal their past life troubles to people who are around them. Abusive parents are most often, kids will hide the fact that they've been physically abused by their parents, either one of their parents, because it's a family secret. And so there's inhibiting factors. So it's not unusual for sexual abuse is one that's frequently hidden. But as often someone comes into Shan saying, I've got a lot of problems. I don't know what they all are. I'm unclear, but I'm not comfortable. I always have, I'm always upset that there's this around certain events. And so that sometimes people will talk about how they have no memory of their childhood at all. Well, it's in there, but it's all shut down. You start working with those people, and gradually bits and pieces of memory will start coming up, incidents or feelings. And I can tell you this. I know that I remember when I was young and around my family, that my mother would say, and my mother would be the most vocal of them, but my mother would say, when Dickie was little, he had no fear of anything. He'd go right up to strangers and start talking to them. When he and even there was something said about until I was 5 that I was just meet everybody. I don't know what went on, but I know that I changed from, I accept that I made a major change to the way I related to the world. And that something probably happened to me when I was 5 years old. It has never come up. It has never risen to the surface. It has, I'm aware that there's been periods of my in living that I didn't want to meet strangers. If I was out shopping or something, I didn't want to talk to anybody, or I just kind of held up. So there's something went on, but I've lived to work around it. And maybe when I find a master Shen technician somewhere, they'll pull up something and I'll be surprised about it. But that's all that I want to say about that particular issue. And unless anybody else has something that they want to add, I'd be pleased.
Richard, can I ask you? I've worked with, I have a particular client who has had very heavy sexual abuse in her past, involving more than sexual abuse, but multiple rape and being held captive for a long period of time. And I guess the challenge, I guess, with her really is that she can go into, her whole body becomes as rigid as an iron bar quite often. And I've kind of like, I do very light touch with her. I do no touch with her, and just run my energy through her centers without touching. And we do a lot of talking. I just wondered what your experience of that has been.
So you're saying that you put your hands in the, but that you don't put your upper hand so it touches the body.
Yeah, because she just can't cope with touch. She can't cope with touch in her centers. I can do long peripheral flows down her sides sometimes, and not always. It's so easy for her to just go into what it looks like is absolute rigid. All her
Terror.
fingers, toes, the whole body goes into
Terror.
Rigid. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that brings me to another question. It feeds me into another question that I have, and I'm going to jump to it. And the question was by someone named Joanne. Do we have a Joanne present? I would like to know more about the uses of edge flows, when they are good to use, and so forth. Right here is this time that I would use edge flows. You're already doing long peripheral flows. What I had been intending to say about that, about the edge flows, is that I didn't have the edge flows in the beginning. They were developed well into the process. Many people have been trained before I figured out. I was experimenting. What would happen if I followed these little rotary flows and went up and down? And I did. And I worked with people that had a considerable amount of Shen. And when I did that session for every one of them who had had a lot of Shen, all of a sudden there was a new level of opening. All sorts of things, little things started, all just bundles of junk stuff came out, and allowed me to go further into the work at the centers. So that very often, in the latter years when I've had clients, after I worked did the juggle back and forth in different centers, I would say, okay, I think it's time to do some rear work, some edge flows, and I did all the edge flows, and then then I was able immediately in that session to go deeper into the work at whatever centers were most effective, and get more up and out, a much more of a clearing and a sense of freedom. So Dave, I would suggest that you could try that.
Okay.
And that it sounds like it would be perfect for it. It'd certainly be one of the things I'd be looking at. If you're able to do long peripheral flows, you're going to be able to back those up with edge flows.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay.
Thank you. That sounds good.
Richard, I'm remembering a client of mine from a few years ago. She had a lot of Shen with me. She'd had continuous sexual abuse from a very young age, from 4 till about 13. Previously, before she'd come to me, she'd had 12 years of counselling.
Yeah.
It was a very, very slow process. She felt she was doing better, but the tension in her body just continued, especially around her neck and shoulders. It was just impenetrable, and it lasted at least 6 months after the last Shen session she had. It was very tough, and I tried everything. And she said, she felt things were getting easier for her emotionally, but that resistance, that tension was just just really tough to crack.
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, I moved away. I'm still in touch with her actually, but I moved away, and it continued. The tension continued, and she's gone back to having counselling. But I don't know what else I could have done. I even had another, Russell even came and worked on her for a couple of sessions when we did a swap. So yeah, it was a tough, difficult situation, really.
Okay. Was there anything that we've said here today that might be more, you think, helpful with
Yeah.
it?
But back to the edge flows, Richard. I have always recommended that at your advice, I think it was, that starting with a new client, for example, it's a good idea to start with the edge flows, and that one, where the other emotional flows are involved.
Oh, okay.
I dare say that I did the edge flows, I did transverse, I did everything I could think of, back flows, obviously center, or everything I could possibly think of, and yeah, it was just a slow process.
Okay.
I have another question, thinking of another client of mine who came for various emotional conditions, and she'd not mentioned that she'd had sexual abuse, but during her first session it came up, and she obviously wasn't ready to work on it, and she didn't come back, unfortunately. So yeah, my question is how, obviously there's just too much fear to work on. If a client, say for instance, if a client is willing to come back, how do we get through the fear apart from working on the cuff, which may well bring up more feelings of sexual abuse? It feels like, how do we help them through the fear?
Well, you've got a difficult problem there because depending on how, yeah, especially if the sexual abuse has included a lot of pain. It's if you if you're able to talk with your client, it's very important to know whether it was oral sexual abuse or whether it was vaginal or anal sexual abuse. Because if it was oral sexual abuse, or if it was in the any of the either the places around the groin, there's probably going to be a lot of pain involved, which would not be there if it was strictly oral. It would change the whole tone of where you would want to work and why you would want to work. So it's something that you should be able to ask the questions before the session starts, before you start treating the person, about what the action was, so that because you really can't craft a good series unless you know.
Yeah, well, this particular client hadn't even put it on her form that she was sexually abused. It was
That's not
only
unusual, but that when she brings it up, she did bring it up.
Mm.
So you could have at that point asked that question to know, say, well, I'll need to know where, more fit to describe more a little bit about what took place,
Yeah.
or however you want to put it. Now, I was going to say that I've had a couple of people who were, this didn't have anything to do with sex, but sexual activity, where I had, or maybe it did, but all we knew was that massive amounts of fear were coming up. And I was unable to work at the fear center, at the solar plexus.
Mm.
So what I did was to edge my way into it by working at the rearwards between the solar plexus and the cough.
Mm-hmm.
And I started with that and then worked with the cough. And in one case I'm thinking of in particular, where the woman had, she was in a car wreck. She was driving and a truck barreled in and hit her on the left side and wrecked the car and her too. And she had a lot of physical damage to that side of her body, but she was, when I met her, she was at it wasn't a Christian meeting, but it was a spiritual event. Well, you might say a non-religious spiritual event. And people had brought her to it because she couldn't drive. And not physically, she was just terrified of driving. She was terrified of being there. She couldn't hardly sit still very long, but they brought her to me and said, can you help her? And I thought, boy, this is a real basket case. And I said, well, I'll give it a shot. So they brought her to my house, or to the boat here. And I had told her care person before they came, look, I'm going to have to work with her alone. I can't work when there are other people in the room. And when she came, she knew that, but she misunderstood. I meant for the person to stay down on my main deck while I took the client up to the upper deck. But she came, as soon as she came in, she told the person now he was going to have to go back and wait in the car. So I figured, okay, I'll let that happen. And I began to work with her. And every time I edged closer to their solar plexus, the fear began to get bigger and bigger. And so I kind of worked around the edges of it, and till she, at the end, she quieted down a little bit, and we arranged another appointment. And when she came, she said she was not quite as afraid, but she was getting better. And so when I began the session, I adopted that policy. I only worked at the rear wards at the solar plexus. And as I worked on her, I could see her eyes. Her eyelids are just fluttering all the time. And this went on and on and on until finally at the end of the session, her eyelids stopped fluttering. And that's when I decided it was time to end the session. And I pointed out, I said, did you ever get into the fear? And she said, well, no, almost, but I didn't quite. So she was aware that she was better. The next time she came, she informed me that they had gone on a picnic at the beach, and the beach that they were on had, so it was where the tide got funneled into big waves and noisy waves, and she said the waves were crashing and it was kind of frightening. And she said she was mind you, unable to be away from her care people for more than just a few feet. She said, I decided to see how far I could go before I became afraid. And she described walking for about a quarter of a mile. And she said, I didn't get afraid, but I decided it was time to go back. And I almost wanted to laugh at her. Say, lady, you've cured yourself. You've worked through your fear. Wake up. But then I was able to go up and work at her fear center, and more came out. So by edging my way into it, I was able to break enough of it that naturally it began coming towards the surface. Anybody else want to chime in on that with anything? No, Adriana brought me some questions, and she, I'll just read this, and just as a point of interest. She says, I'm starting a new client since age 4, became profoundly deaf in one ear and severely deaf on the other. She wears hearing aids. During the taster session, she commented that there were noises in her head. So for the first official session, we both agreed that she would remove the hearing aids. That's, to me, that's pretty obvious. You would, the field, running the field through the hearing aids is going to affect disturb the electronics of it, and would cause problems. So you wouldn't want to. I don't recall ever working on someone with a hearing aid that we didn't take the hearing aid out. We definitely need to take the hearing aid out. And then she goes on to ask, I wonder what the experience of other people has been with different types of disability. And Adriana, I think you also said asked if I'd ever worked with any blind people. Did you? I've never.
Yeah, probably.
I've never worked with a blind person. But I'll throw it to the panel. If you had a blind person, why would you be working with them, and what would you do? Well, why you would be working with them is because they came to you with a problem. Pain or fear or some emotion. So that what you would do, you would be to work with that issue the same way you would work with anybody. But the problem would be you probably would have a great deal of difficulty. You might most likely would have difficulty getting them onto the cradle. You might have to work with somebody in a chair, and you can do that. You're limited. And of course, there are different definitions of blindness. People can either be totally blind and have no visual at all, or they can be legally blind where they can't function in all regards, but they do have some vision, and you might be able to work it out where they could get on the cradle. But again, I've never had anybody come who's blind, and don't recall anybody that I know of working with a blind person. So it's
But can I add with deaf with people, with this particular woman or any deaf person? I'm wondering. First, she wasn't sure because I didn't know you might wanted to talk to me during the session, and then I wouldn't hear you. And I said, don't worry, this is in silence. If I need to talk to you, I'll touch you. And but coaching, I won't be able to coach her if necessary because she won't hear me, for example.
well, we did Shen before I ever learned how to coach. So there you go.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
We did Shen long before I learned how to coach someone.
Okay, so it can work without coaching. Okay.
You don't have I don't care what it is or what your discipline is, but you work with the tools that you've got.
Okay.
You don't work with the
Okay.
tools you don't have.
Okay, point taken. Thank you. Make do. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering if there were any, anyone with experience, and if there was any particular areas I should be attentive to, or I should be mindful of.
You said what?
I was wondering if there were any particular areas of approach the sessions that I should be attentive to or mindful of. But as you said, I've got the tools. I'm practicing the tools. So
Yeah. You have to figure those things out. That's it.
okay. Thank you.
I had a couple of things pop into my mind. Well, one, this is more this is either review and for Adriana, it's more right on it. All of you began, I think every one of you began after we had developed a protocol for a session, meaning that you got a sheet of paper with a bunch of questions that you can ask. Now, one thing that new interns often do is think they have to do everything that's on that page. And it never was meant for that. What it was a list of options that you could ask this question to get things started. You could ask that question to get things started. You could ask something else. But the thing that is most important is that if the person came in crying, you would not sit them down and say, now calm down so that I can ask you all these damn questions. You would say, let's get on the table and see what we can do. And then you would work with whatever you heard in that emotion. It would be probably crying, but inside, if you pay attention, inside that you're going to hear if there's anger or fear. It's very noticeable if you're trying to listen for it. And so then while as you might want to start with say, well, crying is sadness and that's at the heart, it's most likely that the crying is associated with some other emotion. Sure, there's sadness, but there could be anger, and sometimes these things are very mixed. But you do want to do that where you start, you get them on the table and you get to working. I have in many cases when I've worked with someone who came in with a bunch of crying, and you start working with it, the whatever it is quite close to the surface, and it may be resolved within just 4 or 5 minutes. And then they're at a quiet place, and then I would start asking questions either to probe the incident, going a little deeper or in that particular thing, or I might want to at that point say, all right, last time you were here, we worked on this and so, and how has that been since you were here, whatever else that it is. But these forms are to be, they're not rigid. They're meant to be useful tools. And I know that a lot of practitioners, after they completed their internship, still will get out a sheet to keep track of what's going on. And if you don't keep track of if you have more than 1 or 2 clients and you don't keep track of what's going on with each one, you're going to get them mixed up and be working with one on the other person's problems. And that's not going to work for either one of them. So, anybody else? Well, Dave, I just wanted to comment. You've told a lot of people this, but Dave located on Amazon the big grizzly cot. And that's the one you want to get. That's the one that I had initially been saying, this is the one that people want to get. And I kept being told it's not available in the UK. And it turns out it is available, or in the UK and Ireland. And I'll tell you why it works. Most camping cots have 3 sets of legs, 1 at each end and 1 in the middle. But the one in the middle, you could never get your hand under the person's body because of the leg being in the road. So somebody else, he's no longer with us, but he devised the first camping cradle that we used and brought it to a workshop, set it up. But the problem was that we had to work around this middle leg. So I found a place down in Southern California, and I went down and I said, look, you make a good cradle with these bowed legs, these U-shaped legs underneath, and I like, which is what he was using. And I said, I like these, but I need one of these dimensions, and I needed to have 4 of these units. Can you do that? And they said, yeah, we can do that. And they made a couple and shipped them to me, and there were things that weren't right about them. One being that they needed a support through the joints. It was a better arrangement. And I said, if you put another pipe in the middle of this, and they did that. And so that we started ordering cradles from them, and it went on for some time. And then the company got sold, and they tried to make us a set of cradles. They were all wrong. They didn't work. They weren't right. But we got that fixed, and then the company totally went out of business, and another guy bought the business and ordered the cradles from China for 1 round, and then he disappeared. And then but that's where Big Grizzly came into the thing. And this, I don't know who these people were. I don't remember anymore. I remember but the company that produced them for a while wasn't even in the camping business. I forget what they did, but this was some little offshoot that one of their officers wanted them to make. And I never was able to find out why in the world they were making these, but they were making them. And of course, the legs are different, but that's all right. They work fine because you get your hands there where you need them. And they were available in the States for a while, and they may still be. but it was off and on. But they are available in the UK, and if you need them, that's the one you want to get. The other ones that have come out of the UK have not been too successful.
I have a feeling, Richard, that the one I got might have been shipped from the US.
Really?
I think it might, yeah. I'd have to check it now, but
Because I know that for some time the what was available in the UK and Ireland was different than what was available, products that are available in the States. They're run separately, and they were saying you couldn't get them. For a while I bought a bunch, and they were now coming into California, coming into Florida, and I had them shipped from Florida to me. And I packed them up when Saranya came through. We packed up a big suitcase full of a half a dozen of them, and she checked them through as luggage and took them up to England with her. And that was the only way we were getting along. So I'm glad that at least for time being that we'll be able to get them that way.
yeah, it's a fine table. It works really well.
Yep. All right. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to bring?
Can I just say, I'm just looking on Amazon right this minute. Nothing's coming up. I've just put in big grizzly cot, and I can't see anything. There's one with 5 sets of legs, and one with 3 sets of legs, and that's it by the looks of it.
GRIZZ, Jenny?
Yeah, GRIZZY. Yeah, big grizzly cot. Yeah, that's what I put in.
Well, put the word camping in there.
Yep, I have. Yep, I've got other camping chairs, cots or whatever. Yeah, there's one with 3 legs, one with 5, and then one with multiple, yeah, which wouldn't work at all.
It's made by Oasis, OASIS.
Okay.
Oasis big grizzly cot. That's
Right, let's try that.
and it
And
definitely
how much-
comes in the States. I see the bill. The bill is in US dollars here.
And how much was the shipping, David? Because some years
Yeah.
ago when I looked, the shipping was more expensive than the cradle.
No, the cradle came in at $109.99 US dollars. The shipping was $37.92,
Okay.
and the
Thank
tax
you.
I paid $34 tax. It was more expensive than any of the other cradles. But
Oh yeah, I got a
What's it-
feeling you got it out of the United States.
yeah,
Mhm. Still not coming up.
I don't know.
Well, look,
Mm,
I don't want to try to resolve this. This is not the time to do this. But there are
Just
2
like-
Amazons. One is Amazon.com and one is Amazon would be, I imagine, .co.uk.
mm.
And so I suspect that you were buying one from the US and they counted the shipping together. That sounds like the price, because the cradle was, when I bought them in the States, were about $65, and they were shipped across country. The freight was on top of that, but the basic price was about, so it sounds like yours did come out of the States.
I think it did now, and I just went in to see if I could reorder, and it took the reorder. So,
All right.
if I want another one, they'd go again. If you know what I mean.
Are you on, which Amazon are you on? .com or .co.uk?
.com. No.
If it's .com, then that's the one in the States.
Yeah, it's .com. Yeah.
Okay, there you
That's
go.
why. Right, okay. Thanks for
right.
resolving that.
All right, we know how to do it. Okay. I have no more. If that's it. Let's call it good for today.
Thanks very much.
And
Thank
thank
you,
you very
Richard.
much. And it's been good to talk
Thanks,
to you.
folks.
I'm going to stop the recording.